Today, you get to meet Jamie, who, at the age of 22, was left paralysed from an autoimmune condition. His doctors told him there was no known cause, no known cure, and all they could offer him was a series of medications to help him manage his pain over time. Well, Jamie had other ideas and made a very different decision. And so, Jamie's interview today is the first in a series of podcast episodes where I'm going to be talking to you and other people about what's possible and available to us when we make definite different decisions. Jamie is the founder of the Cotswolds Breath and Body Company, an incredible young man with an incredible story that he's come here to share with you today. So grab your cuppa, get ready to be inspired, and let's dive right in. Good morning, Jamie. How are you?
Morning, I'm very good, thank you. How are you, Louise?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very excited to speak to you and to share your story today. So let's not waste any time. Let's just dive straight in. I would love for you to kind of like summarize the story that you shared at the Wim Hoff experience that has led to this conversation today. So I'm going to just pass it over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you said, you came to one of our fundamentals workshops in the Blue Water, and as part of that, we're encouraged to share, our own story with breathing practices and holistic health, and what led us to where we are. And mine was one of personal injury or autoimmune illness for me. So when I was in my early 20s, after university, I wanted to move to London, and I wanted to work in TV, and I don't really know why I wanted to do that, but it was something I wanted to do at the time. And I managed to move there. I managed to get a job there about 22 in London at Channel 4, and I went there to follow that dream. And part of my challenge there was initially financial. I could find a flat to live, but it meant I had to walk everywhere. I couldn't afford transportation anymore as part of being, a young person setting out on their own. And so I would walk 8 miles a day to work, and I very quickly realized it wasn't my dream, but I would start working in the evenings and weekends, and I would be walking all the time as part of that, as a necessity. And I enjoyed walking, but I was doing a lot, both work-wise, and I was doing a lot cardiovascularly, and burning the candle at both ends. I got very ill very quickly. I ended up with an autoimmune condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So essentially, that's where your adaptive immune system, or the part that's meant to decide what isn't meant to be there and develop an immune response, like a virus, for example. It thinks your body's a virus, so it starts to destroy parts of your body, and in my case, it destroys the part of your nerves that carry the messages. And when you lose that, you can lose the ability to move, feel, be aware of your feelings internally, your proprioception, your interoception, and also then eventually lose the function of your organs and
Wow.
pass away. So that was 22, and that sent me on a journey of personal health, as you can imagine.
I can imagine.
Because the specific thing about my condition, and most autoimmune conditions really, is people get told there's no cure for autoimmune conditions mostly. And with my condition specifically, the doctors said there's no known cause of this and there's no known cure.
Wow.
So we think viruses lead to it. I had glandular fever, and we've got treatments you can have. I had all those treatments. But essentially, it's a pharmaceutical response. If you don't keep getting worse, take these 15 tablets a day and carry on and see what happens.
Wow.
So when I heard that, I was always very self-motivated about things. But I decided then that I wanted to be the decider of my own fate. If the doctor doesn't know what to do, or the doctor doesn't know how to cure me, then why am I going to put my store in that summation of where I'm at? It's not that I was ignoring medical professionals. Medical professionals have saved my life, and they saved my life in that instance probably too. But the deciding factor, if they don't know, I'm going to know.
Yeah.
And that leads into things I've learned after this about stuff called the primacy of the brain, where setting your intention actually changes your chemical environment to achieve those things. So, if you set your intention now I teach, Wim Hoff method and ice baths and breathing techniques with my company. If you set your intention to keep yourself warm, your body starts to enact the chemical processes to do that more than if you didn't.
Wow.
That wasn't something I was aware of at the time, but it was something I innately felt was right for me. And So that sent me on a journey of health. I was in a neurological rehabilitation ward then, which is where I lived for a while I was in the acute stage of my illnesses. And then I started to slowly, every day, try and do the next thing I couldn't do.
Right.
So initially, that was my way of having actionable goals. What is in my sphere of influence? And all of this was, I realized as I went on and started to learn about these things, is good first steps, but it felt right at the time to be doing it. It was something I was doing without knowledge at the time. And I would try, when I was sitting in bed and couldn't move my feet, I'd try and move my feet. And then when I could move my foot a bit, I'd try and move my leg. And then when I could move my leg, I'd try and sit up.
Wow.
And then when I could sit up, I'd try and stand. So there was always a goal. And my goal overarching was to be the most well I'd ever been before.
Can I just interrupt you 1 second? Because I just, so was you unable to use your body like at all? Had everything just kind of stopped working? And
yeah, I mean, it's a great question because it's different for everyone with autoimmune. It's different for everyone with my condition too. So my condition's an ascending paralysis. So I also had glandular fever, which was the main thing I felt when I was getting ill, was just how ill I felt. I didn't notice I was paralyzed until it was kind of already mostly happening to me.
Right.
I was focused on just how ill I felt, and you don't ever expect to be paralyzed. But once you're aware of it and it starts happening, it ascends usually from the feet up.
Wow.
So mine stopped kind of in a U shape, starting at my hips and underneath my navel. So that's kind of where my ascending paralysis stopped in terms of internal feeling, external touch sensation, and being able to move.
Wow.
And also, the outside of my hands started to go. So I'd drop things quite a lot. The left side of my face was paralyzed. And then it would be creeping up, but it kind of settled in those main areas. And then I was able to start to try and reverse it from there. So there was a period of time where I was completely, immobile from above the waist down. But interestingly, you can actually stand up in that situation, but you need support.
Right.
So you can, for example, you can do a lot of things you don't expect to do. You have no feeling, and if you were to stand unassisted, you would just fall over. And if you were to, but you can, if you hold on to things, feel like you're standing on your hips and balance and use your brain to overcome the physical side. And that's part of the neuroplasticity that I learned in breathwork and cold exposure is you're infinitely adaptable in all these different areas. So when I couldn't stand up, I could still make myself stand up with assistance, but my brain reinterpreted what I could do. So I could maybe feel the very top of my femur on the inside a little bit, and it felt like I was standing on that instead of my feet.
Wowzers.
And I could try and neurologically get my head around that to try and stand up, but that's a part of your progression, it's realizing what you are capable of. And you hear this a lot about people who lose sight. They start to have other senses that they tune into more. It's just listening to your body and your intuition, really. But that was my situation.
And was there, I know what I really do want to focus on, like making the decision, but before that, was there ever a time when, the fear and the uncertainty was like overwhelming and that you couldn't see a way? Or do you feel like you got your diagnosis, you went full into, right, I'm going to see what I can do?
There definitely was a point of sadness and despair, I think. But it was, I mean, I wrote an article about this actually. So I was very into film and TV and scripts and all that, because that was what I trained to do. That's what I went. That was where my head was at the time, because that was what I was trying to do in London. And films and stories are quite powerful. And I had a lot of stories from fiction that helped me out in this situation. And the one for me was from Lost. Remember that show Lost on TV?
Yes.
Where they crashed on an island in a plane.
Yeah.
I had a story from that. In the pilot episode of that, Jack, the main character, is in the woods and he's trying to sew himself up. And Kate comes in and has to sew him up. Otherwise, he's going to be in a bad situation. And she's panicking. And he tells her a story about, a fictional story in this show, about his first spinal surgery where he had to cut a certain thing. And if he cut this sack next to it, the patient would die. And he did cut it. and he panicked and he gave himself 5 seconds, he said, and he counted to 5, and he had all the traumatic emotions in that 5 seconds. And then after that 5 seconds, he sewed them up and carried on. And that story roused her to action. So I had that same story. So when I was finally in a hospital, I'd been to about 4 or 5, and they'd all sent me home, because it's very hard to diagnose this type of condition. As anyone with autoimmune will know, it's very hard to get a diagnosis. And by the time I was in hospital, and I was still getting worse, and the pain was unbearable, etc. It's very painful to be paralyzed with a neurological condition. I went into the shower, and I refused all help. I always refused all help, because I wanted to do it myself, which is good and bad in a way. You need that drive, but you also need to accept help.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into the shower, the disabled shower. I was in a wheelchair. I managed to lift myself into the seat below the shower, and I managed to turn the shower on. And I looked up, and the water went into my eye. And I didn't realize that you reflexively close your eyes in a shower. My left eye was paralyzed, so I couldn't close my eye. And I hadn't even realized, because the face went after the body. I'd sort of got used to the body, stabilized the pain, and then in 5 seconds, like butter melting in a pan, my face went. And that really hit me hard, because I was like, this is my identity. This is who I think I am. I look in the mirror, I talk to people. If I lose my face, it felt like a big loss. It felt like my ability to communicate was gone. And when that water went into my eye, I realized, oh, actually, I'm screwed. I've got, this is it. And I just remember crying in the shower. I was just crying in the shower about that. And then I remembered that story from Lost.
Wow.
And I gave myself those 5 seconds, and then I decided to do the next thing I couldn't do and keep working on that, and really solidified my conviction then, thanks to a fictional show from the 90s.
I love it. Listen, whatever it takes, right? And it's just however that landed with you. And I love how you said, like, it solidified your conviction to do what you needed to do. So tell us then, obviously you said every day I did the next thing that I couldn't do. What was the next step for you? Because you'd gone from obviously not being able to do anything for yourself. How long was you in rehab for?
Gosh, I think my family would know that more than me. I think maybe I was in hospitals. I was allowed to be in rehab for 3 months. I think I left rehab after a month, and I was in 2 other hospitals before that.
Right. And so what was your journey once you'd left that sort of environment? What was your journey then? What was your next decision?
After leaving medical establishments?
Yeah.
So by the time I'd left there, I'd got myself to what I thought was a good place. I'd been able to teach myself to walk again. I had enough feeling that I could stand up unassisted. But I was still walking like with your brain as opposed to your body. So if you've ever seen a kid try and walk, or you've ever tried to throw your legs without feeling it, that's kind of where you're at. But I was doing work every day on balance, on proprioception, the awareness of where your limbs are in space. When we stand up, our feet make micro adjustments to keep us stood up. You lose all that. So I was working on that every day. I was doing like lunges every day. I was doing balance exercises every day. And that's where I went back to when I left. I immediately went back to London. I was in a rehabilitation in Liverpool, where my family's from. And I immediately went back to London and lived on my own.
Wow.
To try and have what I thought was a normal life, right? And there's a lot of benefit in that, but that bullheadedness. I say my recovery is 99% bullheadedness and 1% physical. It's all mental.
Yeah.
And that's fine while you're still doing things every day, but when you come up to roadblocks that set you back, for example, mine was to try and lower my medicine, to try and do more things. I had to spend a lot of time adjusting to being able to accept that I could do one thing in a day, and then I wouldn't have the physical or mental energy to do any more. Where I was used to being able to just do whatever I wanted, right? I was walking 8 miles a day before getting ill, and now I can walk round the corner to the shop, and that's all I could do that day. So that was something to get used to. And then I would slowly try and build up to being able to do 2 things, 3 things in a day. after years, after 7 years, I could do 3 things in a day.
Wow.
Um, and in the process of that, I'd tried to lower my medicine, which I had, but I was still on 15 tablets, just lower doses of 15 tablets. I couldn't get it any lower. I'd had therapy during this as well as part of my recovery package. I'd had facial physio as part of my package. I'd had occupational health. I'd had all of these different things. And they try and give you these things in rehab as well if you have them. But really, that's potentially the wrong time. I was never in a bad place in rehab because I had my goal to get out of rehab.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're 3 years down the line and you're knocked off track, that's when you're in a bad place because
That's
you
what I
feel
want.
like, have I
Yeah.
failed?
That's what I wanted to ask, because when you said 7 years, I mean, that's a really long time to
Yeah.
to keep going. I mean, what can you remember any of the things that you would say to yourself, or or what was that? What were the what was the one thing or the two things that just made sure that you didn't give up when you got knocked back?
It was never a knockback. So it was always the next thing I couldn't do.
Right.
So my aim was to do the next thing I couldn't do and to try and do that every day. If I didn't get it that day, I would get it the next day. And if I didn't get it the next day, I'd get it the day after that. I always had those micro goals, and I had to make adjustments in the short term that I believed would pay off in the long term. So if I went anywhere with friends, I would have to go there, sit down in a corner, and that's how I could go there. I couldn't stand up, I couldn't socialize, I couldn't be involved in those conversations. But if someone came over to me, I could be there.
Yeah.
And in that way, I wasn't losing out, and I had to do that in all aspects of life.
Amazing.
I remember one time I went to see a comedy show, and the left side of my face was still paralyzed at this point, and there was a friend on the right and a friend on the left of me, and the friend on the right was having a whale of a time, and the friend on the left looked like someone had died, and I realized that they were on my paralyzed side. So they thought I wasn't finding this funny at all, and they were sharing that energy with me, and the person on the right was having a whale of a time.
Oh, it's so funny. And how
But I
lovely
came
your
to realize,
friend,
like,
but how lovely that your friend wanted to kind of like mirror you so that you didn't feel that, you
yeah,
got
no
one
one
out.
ever. We didn't talk about it. It just happened.
Wow. I love that.
But you learn you learn what's a facade and you learn what's real. So, for example, I felt with facial paralysis more than my body that I'd lost more, right? Because I
Right.
thought I'd lost my ability to communicate. Whereas I realized that that was actually kind of nonsense, and you are not your external self. Never has that become more apparent than when you're paralyzed, because you become this it sounds wanky, but you become this consciousness inside your body. So you're aware of this external vehicle, and you're aware that you live somewhere else inside of it, and as who you are. And yeah, there are parts of your external self that are who you are. For example, how you smile, how you look at things, how you pick things up, the running you might do, or whatever you might do in life that you think identifies you. But I realized through talking to people in that I didn't know, like servers in fast food places back when I ate fast food when I first went back to London, I could still have a conversation with them and I could still communicate with them, and there was no difference with the fact that half my face wasn't there. That was all my ego thinking that that was who I was. So you have little micro learnings as you go along and you make adjustments. And the thing that kept me going was the realizations I had about self, the realizations that I was still progressing or wanted to progress, doing the next thing I couldn't do. When I could do 2 things in a day, I had to look back and go, oh, there's a change. When I could do 3 things in a day, I was like, oh, there's a change. And then when you reach a wall that you feel is immovable, like I did at 7 years, that's when you really start to crash unless you find something else. And I was very lucky at that time to find breath work and cold exposure, which ended up changing everything for me.
Yeah, so tell us more about that, because that's obviously we met when I came to your workshop and heard your story, and And then just to see you and imagine you as you were when you were like 21, 22, and then watching you there and talking about what
Mm.
you do now, I think it's just something that everyone needs to hear. So tell us about how did you find it, and how did you start to use it, and what happened?
Yeah, well, I'm in my mid-30s now. I'm 34 this year.
Well, you're well old.
And in comparison to when I was ill, yeah.
Says
So
me
it's
at
been
48.
11, 12 years maybe. I've been ill
Yeah.
now, maybe. Um, and I'd reached the point where I had identified what was right for me. And everyone's what right for them will be different. So
Mm.
I'd identified that I couldn't do cardio because of my physical and mental fatigue, but I could do resistance training. So weightlifting specifically helped my pain, it helped blood flow, and it helped my energy levels. I could do that. I was doing meditation via Headspace. That was helping me. Nutrition was the foundation of everything, so I changed my nutrition to what worked for me. And then I started doing blood tests every 6 months to check that my nutrition was doing what I wanted it to do, which it wasn't, and I had to make adjustments. So I had all of these things that worked, but I couldn't get my medicine any lower, and I was constantly trying to get my medicine lower. And with my condition, especially, my experience was that everything is guided by the patient. So the doctors, not that they don't care, they just don't have any input as far as my experience is.
Right.
They ask you, if you weren't self-initiating, lowering your medicine and doing all of that, no one ever would.
Right.
And you would just be on it, and the dosages would go up for the rest of your life. That's my experience. Maybe I had bad luck with doctors, but my experience is that you stay on this stuff and it only goes up. So I had constantly tried to, and I'd reached a point where I knew from that 7 years that my pain was coming back too much when I lowered my pain meds. It wasn't going away after 2 weeks, which was my usual pattern when I lowered it, and I was stuck. So then I saw a video about the specific breathing was the Wim Hoff method breathing, which I'm an instructor in now, and our company teaches. And I saw a man with my condition on YouTube in his 60s in America, and my condition's worse the older you get it. And he said he wasn't using his crutches anymore. He said he had more energy than he ever had. He kept doing the splits.
Wow.
And he said it's because of this. And I thought, that sounds like bullshit. But he said it's proven by scientific experimentation, and here's some of the information. Here's this man Wim Hof who put the structure of the program together, and it's his method. And breathing techniques I since found out have been around as long as there've been humans. But what this methodology did is it made it very easy for anyone to do. It made it very intuition based, so you listen to your own bodily signals as opposed to counting or doing all these other things that a lot of other breathwork practices do. And it was the first one to prove through Western science the effects. So I started to learn about this, and I started to learn about Wim, who's an identical twin, and I started to learn that his mantra was that anyone can do this and he's not special. And I learned that they'd done experiments on him, injecting him with endotoxins with E. coli, and usually he'd have a severe immune reaction, and he didn't have an immune reaction. He actually skipped the symptoms of illness and went straight to healing from the illness in his blood work.
Wow.
For anyone who's interested in that, that's suppressing the innate immune system and boosting the adaptive immune system. That's what's happening there. And then I learned that they tested him and his identical twin and found that his twin couldn't do what he could do. His twin did the breathing but not the cold. And Wim said again, it's a whole method. And that now we know through studies that the benefits are compounding if you do all of the aspects as opposed to just one of them. So breath, mindset, and cold is the Wim Hof method. So I started doing that, and I did the breathing, and I was originally pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to do things like putting effort in and trying to do longer and longer. And I was doing all these things that I felt mindset and bullheadedness are for. And I wasn't listening to my body, and I wasn't listening to my signals. And I went to a workshop like the ones I now run, and I learned about that. I learned that it doesn't matter if you try and hold your breath or not. It doesn't matter how long you hold your breath. It doesn't matter how long you're in the ice water. What matters is listening to your own feelings, listening to your own signals from your body. And then I got in an ice bath, which was incredibly painful for me because of my nerve condition.
Oh
But when I
no.
got out, I felt incredible.
Mm.
And that kept me going back because I knew I'd read the studies and there's stuff online that you can find out about that. So I knew in principle it should work. And I was doing everything else, so why not keep doing this?
Mm.
And I felt great after I'd stopped pushing in the breathing and I just accepted what my body wanted and done that. When I started listening to my body, it got even better. And when I started being more relaxed, it got even better. These are all sides of myself I'd never used. I'd always been driven focused. I'd never been surrender focused. I'd never surrendered to my body and done things that could change it. I'd always tried to push my body through things. So I started to learn other sides of myself that I hadn't exercised. And then I started to do this more and more. And after 3 months going in the ice, I didn't have the pain going in the ice anymore. And then after a year of going in the ice, I felt almost like I'd forgotten. I don't think I need my medicine anymore.
Mm.
And then I slowly went to the doctor and came on a plan to come off it, and I didn't need it anymore.
Wow.
When I cycled down, the pain didn't return. It started to go away. And if I did the ice every day, there were no pain signals. And then I reached a point where I realized that I don't have a limit on the amount of things I can do in the day anymore.
Wow.
There's not 3 things I can do in a day. I actually felt like I had so much energy, I had to start running,
That's amazing.
which is not something I ever liked doing. I ran in school, but it wasn't something I wanted to do. And I started running, like I told you guys in our workshop, from our house to my fiance's work, which is 14.5 miles away.
Wow.
Because part of this, when you engage your mind, and part of these types of practices, and part of the primacy of the brain is understanding that you are capable of things. And unlike before, where I just decided I wanted to do this, I now knew that chemically I was priming my body to be able to do it too. So it wasn't just bullheadedness anymore, although bullheadedness is somewhat important. It was bullheadedness mixed with listening to my body and priming my body chemically to have more energy, to have more endurance, to have all these different things that breath and cold practices can give you. So then I started doing that, and that was a massive change for me because I went from not being able to do cardio at all to doing huge amounts of cardio.
That's just incredible.
And it was something that snuck up on me. I had this aim to be the most well I'd ever been. But when I learned to do breath work and cold practices, and the reason I now teach it is it gave me something else other than determination. Someone can be a determined person and someone can be a driven person. But that can be a fair weather trait, you know? And if something knocks you off, you can fall hard. Whereas I'd had a practice develop in me that the whole purpose was to go inside yourself and feel what your body is telling you to do and not do. And in doing that, you're infinitely more capable. And I constantly work on that and adjust my micro goals. So, for example, I was running a long way, but I was doing interval running. I was running until I had to walk, then I was walking, then I was running again. In the last couple of months, I've started again challenging myself, because if you want to keep this neuroplasticity, you have to keep giving yourself the environment to create new neurological connections. So for me, I wanted to run without stopping. So over the last couple of months, I've done that, and now I don't have to stop anymore. And you can keep doing this in your own life.
Can I just ask a question there then? Because I loved how you said about having gone from driven focused to surrender focused and moving away from that always pushing and that bullheadedness. And this is one of the things that I've really been interested in over the last kind of like 6 months is, you know, that very, you know, more the alpha type. And then how do we bridge that gap between still being driven and still being, like you sort of said, like, putting ourselves into the space where there's new challenges, but how do we do that? Or how, I don't even know if I'm asking the question the right way. How have you formulated that in your brain now so that it's not a case of proving a point or pushing yourself further? It's more of an exploration about what's possible for you. Like, did I ask that question the right way?
I think so. I mean, there were a couple of sides to it. So the first side for me, and everyone's different. I'm just one person. Everyone's got their own struggles and journeys, and everyone will come to their own conclusion. But for me, it was it was very hard for me to go back to what I thought my life was about, which was
Mm.
the creative industry. Having a realization in hospital that for me it was pointless.
Mm.
So when I was in hospital, I felt that not only is it borderline narcissism, that career path for myself,
Mm.
it was seemingly absent of any sort of um, honesty or purpose or ethics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was seemingly self-serving, and then
Yeah.
I had a big challenge going back into that career, going, what? How do I do something that I now think empties my soul as opposed to fills it, right?
I love
Um,
that.
so for me, the realization I came to was that it's no longer goal orientated, as in I want to have done X by X age. It's I want I want to be doing the things I like doing around people that I value, and it's those connections with those people that matter. And it can still lead to a goal. You can still
Mm-hmm.
want to make something,
Yeah.
but the important thing isn't making the thing. The important thing is the day-to-day interactions with the people you're doing it with, and that naturally leads to a goal. So that was how I was able to reconcile that career. Is looking at it and going, it's the people that I'm doing things with and the conversations and connections that matter, not the thing that we're doing. And
Love.
then it became something that mattered more to me because it was people that mattered. It wasn't the thing.
Oh, love it. So with that being said, I know that I'm probably rushing you through a little bit, but just mindful of time. I to get to that stage now where obviously you're running and you know, you didn't need the meds and so on. What was the journey from that space to you then doing what you do now, setting up your company, doing these workshops all over the country, you know, sharing your story? I mean, the workshop was just insanely good, I have to say.
Thank you.
You know, every part of it was just amazing. And I think now you've just said that about, it's not so much the goal, it's about the connections and the conversations and the interactions on that journey. That now sums up what the event was like, because you created that
Mm.
space to have those
Oh, thank you.
conversations with other people. And you know, when we all got in the ice bath at the end, celebrating everyone that got in and celebrating everyone that got out, and it was just beautiful. So how did you transition to do that?
I think I might. Well, thank you. But I think for me, when I first decided to be an instructor, it was to deepen my own practice, not to start a business.
Oh, wow.
So I went to do it purely to try and get a deeper connection with my own ability to do it and
Mm-hmm.
my own recovery. So I was approaching it from a non-commercialized point of
Mm-hmm.
view. And then once I did that, I I got so much from it that I genuinely felt compelled to keep doing it and make
Mm-hmm.
us. And the realization that I had in hospital was that for me at the time, and it was a very biased viewpoint, the at the time the only career that seemed worthwhile was healthcare.
Yeah.
Um, and this was healthcare adjacent, and it felt like I was giving something that mattered.
Mm.
So everything I did from there on was always from a point of view of people and sharing and doing all this stuff, and then it's more interesting for me to build a business and try and do something well, because I still have that bullheadedness and I still have that drive to do things, but that's never the goal. Like
Mm-hmm.
the goal is to fill up my cup as much as possible, and it so happens that I'm doing something that that we know works, has proven to be works, and people get so much from it that I can keep doing it. But my aim with all of it has been from a point of view of everyone's different. I'm not special. My
Mm.
own story is something I tell as part of this, but it's not something I focus on really.
Yeah.
My own purpose is to try and help people unlock within themselves the knowledge that they're infinitely more capable than they think they are. And I'm currently, I do those Wim Hof workshops and I show that, but there's lots of other things I do as well, and hopefully I can fold that in too and try and find as many of these things as possible that check the same boxes, proven about how they work, person focused.
Mm-hmm.
It all came from, and it's never really happened to me like that before, because I've had a company before when I was 18, a film company, and that was never the goal. The goal was, what am I going to do by a certain age?
Yeah.
It was all very selfish goal, really, when I look at it. I mean, not selfish, but just personal focused.
Yeah. Well,
This is
I think that's just what society really has given us. And I think, as I explained to people we've got on the call, I predominantly work with small business owners, from the perspective of helping them grow their business, but without sacrificing. So because their business is an extension of who they are.
yeah,
Right. So once we get caught up in, I'll be happy when I've got this goal, I'm making this money, I've got this number of clients, da 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 da, we're missing exactly what you just said. We're missing the connection, the conversations, and the grounding in the everyday journey that we've got, that we're
it's
blessed to
so
have.
important. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's filtered. I mean, look, people have to pay rent, people have to do all this stuff, so you're not immune to reality. But
Yeah.
everything I always do with this is always from a point of view of like, I'm genuinely doing this because it changes my life every day in my own practice, and it fills up my cup. And what is the best way to do that for other people, and make sure that it's always not about me, and it's always about them, and it's always about showing everybody what they're capable of, and it's always about trying to lead by example, not talk about leading by example. Like it's all comes from that side, and it's quite remarkable, really, that for me that is a thing, because it's not something I think you could try to get to necessarily. I wouldn't know how to do that. It's just something that's happened, and I'm very, very grateful it's happened. If I hadn't have gotten ill, I think I would have been a vastly different person.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, before you tell people where they can find you, and I'll put all the links in the show notes anyway, what is your one thing tomorrow that I can't do today that you're working towards?
Very good question. So over the last couple of months, it's been running without stopping. And I've sort of got a handle on that now.
Excellent.
But like with all this stuff, you have to keep a handle on it. My next thing I can't do is trying to work on consistency in my mindset. So with mindset, it's for the Wim Hof method at least, or for breath practices, it's feelings based. So listening to the feelings you're experiencing in your body, not just not emotional feelings, but physical sensations. And then eventually being able to influence and change them. So that can mean thermogenesis, warming yourself up. That can mean warming specific parts of your body up. That can mean relaxing when you're tense. All of these different things are chemical processes that you can influence and train during doing breathing and cold. For me, I think the hardest thing comes in staying with that feeling brain, as opposed to drifting into the thinking brain, or even just thinking about a meeting or thinking about a conversation, and not being completely centered in your practice as you get the chance to experience in a workshop. You'll know this from being at these things. When you're not thinking about guiding yourself, you're not thinking about life, it's very easy to get to that headspace. When you're in life, it can fluctuate, and there are times where I've been really, really in key with that, and there's been times when I'm not so in key with that, and I want to try and be able to get into that headspace quicker and get into that headspace in my daily practice. So there's a lot of mindset stuff I'm working on at the moment, and how to elucidate that to people as well, because the mindset is so ephemeral often and so poorly described, that I want to be able to find that for myself and communicate that to other people.
I love it. And I'm sure if anyone can do it, Jamie, then you can do it. And when you've got the workshop ready, you can just email me. So as we wrap up, a massive thank you for sharing your story, and just really helping people to understand what's possible when you make the decision and then you commit. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken away today, you said it so many times, it was just having those micro steps, having the micro learnings. And if I couldn't do it that day, I'll do it the next day. Or if it wasn't that day, I'll do it the next day. Just staying true to what you was working on. I think that is just a lesson that we can all take. So where can people find you, Jamie?
So we're cotswoldbreathandbody.com. That's also us on social media, Cotswold Breath and Body. Our website's there, our social media's there. We're going to be, if you're Cotswold based, we're going to be at a festival at Far Peak Climbing Centre in Northleach on the 11th of March.
Okay.
If you want to come and meet us and say hello. But everything's on our website.
Fabulous. And you're on Instagram as well, right? Under Cotswold Breath and Body.
Yeah, all the same, yeah.
Fabuloso. Jamie, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed hearing your story again and just finding out a bit more detail.
Thanks, Louise.
Thanks,
for having
Jamie.
me.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Remember, if you want to find out more about Jamie and what he does now, please do check him out at the Cotswold Breath and Body Company. I've been making sure to put in the show notes links to his social media channels and his website. Thank you for listening, as always, to the Your Rich Life podcast, and I will speak to you again next week.